Can Virginia Tech men close out the season strong and get a first-round bye in the ACC tournament?
Do the Lady Hokies have what it takes to compete in this year's big dance?
We got Hokies, hoops, and more in this edition of the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show.
Come on inside the Moss Art Center where we got sun in Blacksburg for the first time in a while. It's a beautiful Friday morning. I'm Robbie Ackerly. He's Landon Weaver, and Landon, we got a fun show on tap today.
Indeed we do. No, Robbie, I love the warm weather. It feels like spring again, but knowing Blacksburg, it's just going to plummet next week.
Yeah, it's tough out here. But let's dive right into the Hokie sports action. Of course, let's start with men's basketball. There's been ups this season. There's been downs. They're overperforming, if you could say. But none of that matters as they gear up and head towards Charlotte, North Carolina.
No, they really have been overperforming. They've been exceeding expectations, and we've been saying that all year. They're 12-16 on the season, 7-10 in ACC play. There were points in the season when we thought they could maybe get to 500. They're not going to get there, unfortunately, but they still have a chance to maybe get a first-round bye in the ACC tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's take a look at what happened last game, Landon.
Yeah, we'll go into the highlights right now, actually. It was a slow start for the Hokies as Chucky Hepburn stole the ball and ran the floor to put the Cardinals up 11-0 early. Middle of the first half, BT chopping wood as Rechsteiner connects from deep, cutting the lead to 8. Mama, there goes that man again. Rechsteiner hits from just above the free throw line to bring the Hokies within 3. Hepburn played villain yet again as he hit nylon from downtown to put Louisville up by double digits. They go into halftime with a 34-26 lead. Another Chucky Hepburn highlight, but this time he throws the pass to James Scott for the dunk. And check out that Hannibal Lecter mask. But here come the Hokies. TJ sends a 3-ball down the hatch. 5-point lead for Louisville. Jaden Young connects from long range, and he's got it. Tie game with 10 to go. Terrence on the other end connects from 3. Cardinals up 7. But the Hokies kept fighting. Rechsteiner with the sweep behind the back move to set up the midi pull-up, and that was cash. He cuts the lead to 1. That wouldn't be enough as Louisville closed out the Hokies in Castle 71-66. They moved to 15-2 in conference play, Robbie. What a season for Louisville and Pat Kelsey's men.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a year where the ACC's been a little weaker, Louisville now has a chance to steal the title if Duke slips up, of course, with their big win over Clemson. So Louisville, a great season for them, really overperforming and beating out teams like UNC who are kind of underperforming. And in a weak year for the ACC, Louisville looks pretty strong.
They do. And what didn't help Virginia Tech in this game was 22 turnovers. Talk about 2 crucial turnovers by Rechsteiner. As the game was winding down, he threw the ball into the crowd, dribbled another one off his foot. What's the problem for Virginia Tech against these ranked teams? Because they seem to be making it close. Pitt was close. It was a 5-point game. Clemson was close until the second half. What's the problem?
I mean, I'm not really sure at this point because you could chalk it up to the inexperience earlier in the season, but now as we get into the dog days of the regular season, you can't really blame it on that anymore.
Yeah.
Mike Young was understandably upset in the press conference about the 22 turnovers. Rechsteiner, like you mentioned, just threw it into the crowd on the Hokies' last possession, kind of last chance to score and make this an even game with a ranked team. So Virginia Tech throwing away the ball and just turning the ball over constantly. We saw it with the women's last week, of course. You just can't do that if you want to win games.
Yeah, I mean, 22 turnovers is a ton. You cut those possessions down, or you cut those turnovers down to 12, 10, that's 12 extra possessions. And in a 5-point game, you can get a bunch of points out of those extra possessions and knock off a ranked opponent. So it's unfortunate, but let's shift over to the future. The Hokies take on Syracuse men's basketball tomorrow at 12 p.m. inside of Castle Coliseum. They're very similar to the Virginia Tech Hokies in their record. About the same overall record, but conference play, the Syracuse are a game behind Virginia Tech. Robbie, what do you see in this matchup?
You know, it's definitely going to be an interesting one. Both teams on paper are kind of similar in record, like you mentioned, and it's going to be a test for this Hokies team, a test for the Syracuse Orange team. But let's take a look at what Syracuse did last game. It was a decisive win over the NC State Wolfpack. Inside the JMA Wireless Dome, the Orange hit back-to-back layups to jump out to a 4-0 lead early. 4-1 now. A triple from Jair Davis puts Cuse up 6. NC State would answer, but it was the Orange hitting bucket after bucket after bucket, making it 13-3 with 13 minutes left in the first half. From here, it was all Cuse. Up 19-8, a gorgeous lay by Kyle Cuff Jr. makes it 21-8. 25-12 now, and the pump fake and 1 for Chris Bell. That was the story in this one. State was good, but Cuse was just better. 7 minutes to go now in the second half. Orange still up 10. J.J. Starling from downtown. State keeps fighting, but the Orange, it's J.J. Starling again with the dagger, puts Cuse up 15 with less than 2 minutes to go. Domination, for the most part, by Red Archery and his crew. 74-60, Syracuse improves. A decisive win over the Wolfpack, and maybe not the Cuse of old, but still certainly a challenge for this Hokie squad. And Syracuse's resume, when you look at common opponents, is very interesting when talking about this game.
It is. You know, they've played Louisville, they've played Miami, and they've played Boston College. It was a 85-61 loss to Louisville, and compared to the Hokies, they fought hard against the Cardinals. They also lost to Miami, which the Hokies have defeated Miami back-to-back in a 1-point win here in Castle Coliseum and then a dominant victory down in Coral Gables. And they did, however, almost score triple the amount of points that Virginia Tech did against Boston College in a 95-86 victory over the Eagles, in which Virginia Tech scored 11 in the first half. Not really sure how that's possible among D1 teams, but 11 points in the first half is simply not a recipe for winning, and Syracuse went against that, and they won the game. They're second to last in the ACC in points allowed per game with 78. The Hokies will definitely look to take advantage of that, and they have some stars on the offensive end. J.J. Starling, 18 points per game, and he takes a lot of shots. He's going to be looking to score heavy against Rex Steiner and Ben Hammond, taking advantage of those matchups. And the Hokies are really going to have to hope that Melagel Poteet is healthy and can come back and combat the skyscrapers. And Eddie Lampkin and Donnie Freeman, a combined 24 points and 18 rebounds between the two of them. Yeah,
absolutely. We talk about common opponents, and while Syracuse didn't keep it close to Louisville, Virginia Tech did, and you might want to think that if Poteet was in that game, Virginia Tech comes away with it maybe. He's a huge piece of this Virginia Tech team. But then, like you mentioned, Boston College, it's kind of confusing how a Syracuse team can lose to Miami, which VT beat twice, and then they can go to Boston College and just put up 95 points, something Virginia Tech definitely could not replicate 95 points. But it's going to be quite the battle between Virginia Tech and Syracuse. It's time to look big picture, however, across the ACC. With only a few games left of conference play, our very own Connor Arthur is breaking down the ACC bracket and giving you the inside scoop of who he thinks this year's frontrunners and Cinderella stories are. Connor?
March Madness is here for men's basketball, and with that, there are so many teams that are trying to go dancing. But before we start preparing for the madness, we got to take a look at the Atlantic Coastal Conference. The ACC has raised a few eyebrows during the 2024-25 season, with only 7 out of the 18 teams having a winning percentage above 500. A few teams in the conference have the capability to win the ACC tournament, starting off with the 17th ranked Louisville Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals have already clinched a 2-round bye, earning a spot in the quarterfinals. Louisville currently stands at 22-6 with a record of 15-2 in the ACC, with Duke and Georgia Tech being the only victors against them. The Cardinals have been dominant on the road, going 9-2 to finish their season. Their last road match drove them down to Blacksburg, where, let's just say, got a little bit too close for comfort, slightly dashing ahead to win 71-66. The win had come from the Louisville capability to force the Hokies to turn the ball over, forcing 22 turnovers during the outing. Though it looked a bit ugly for the Cardinals, a win is still a win. The team finished the season playing against teams like Pitt, California, and Stanford. Louisville is looking to make a name for themselves come tournament time. Next up, a team that surprised a lot of people back in the fall on the gridiron. Of course, I'm talking about the SMU Mustangs, currently sitting at 21-7 and 12-5 in the conference. The Mustangs have been without their lead scorer and assist artist, Boopie Miller, since their loss against Wake Forest due to injury. That loss occurred on February 15th. Since other players have been stepping up to the plate, teammates like Chuck Harris and B.J. Edwards have been keeping the ball rolling. Take the game against California, for example, with Edwards finishing the game with 21 points, going 9 for 12 in scoring attempts. A big takeaway for the Stangs preparing for teams like Stanford, Syracuse, and Florida State is the fact that will Boopie Miller be ready when SMU goes to the Queen City? Miller averages 13.4 points per game, which brings the team's total points to 82.1. SMU, in their first year in the ACC, is hoping to keep the surprises going in Charlotte. Going down the list, the 14th ranked Clemson Tigers have a massive amount of momentum going into the ACC tournament, securing a quarterfinal spot. The Tigers, just months after winning the ACC championship in December in football, would like to host the trophy on the court. Clemson recently secured the most ACC wins in their program's history, making the season historic for the folks in South Carolina. Clemson is currently on a 5-game winning streak, starting with their gigantic upset against the Duke Blue Devils. Clemson currently sits at 3rd in the ACC with a 15-2 record in the conference and an overall record of 23-5. The biggest reason for the success is their ability to score. Chase Hunter has been a big name on campus, having a scoring average of 16.7 points per game and a scoring average of 47.9%. Hunter is also 42.8% beyond the arc. With a finishing schedule of Virginia, Boston College, and Virginia Tech, the Tigers might not only be the scary monster at the Spectrum Center, but potentially in San Antonio. Oh, and how could I forget about one of the most dominant teams in college basketball and the #2 team in the nation, the Duke Blue Devils. Now, we can't just breeze by the fact that Cooper Flagg is truly one of the best freshmen I have ever seen on the court. I mean, seriously, 19.4 points per game, that's leaning towards an NBA stat. As a freshman, the man really does it all, leading in scoring, steals, blocks, and assists, and rebounds per game. Duke has the ability to head to the national championship with ease, but with staining losses against Kentucky, Kansas, and Clemson, the team is most certainly not immortal. The Duke Blue Devils stand at 25-3 overall with a 16-1 record in the ACC. With a double round bye and an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament, Duke can genuinely push for more greatness, as if Coach K never left. But there is a storm brewing with a secret weapon hoping to bamboozle the top teams in the ACC. There's a little team down in Winston-Salem that's been creating a name for themselves. It's the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Walking a tightrope that is 5th in the conference, the Deeks 19-9 with an 11-6 record in the ACC. Yes, Wake Forest is not perfect, but neither was the Wolfpack of NC State last year, and look what happened to them. The Deacons have some work to do if they want to go to the NCAA tournament, but the ACC tournament might be their chance to do it, with players such as Hunter Salas leading in a dominant scorer for the team, Trayvon Spillers, who is a catalyst on defense, and Cameron Hildreth. There's a strong chance that the Wake Forest Demon Deacons could go far, but it's still anyone's game as 15 teams make their way to Charlotte. Prepare for some surprises, for it is March after all. The ACC tournament starts with a Game 1 on Tuesday, March 11th at 2 p.m., and the championship game at 8:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 15th. Guys?
Great stuff, Connor, as always. And it's definitely going to be interesting, Landon, to see how the rest of this season plays out. But for now, let's take a look at the ACC tournament. With a few games left to play, if it started today, how would it look?
Well, it looks like Virginia Tech, as of now, would take on a Notre Dame team that they beat down in South Bend in a great comeback victory. That would be at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, March 11th. What do you think about Duke, though? What's their path to the championship looking like?
I mean, for me, I'm looking at it, and it looks pretty simple. If you're the Duke Blue Devils, of course, you're one of the best teams in the country, and you have that double bye. You have a date with either Georgia Tech or Florida State as your first game. Should be able to handle it. And Duke's just been dominant in ACC play. Apart from that one slip-up against Clemson, I really can see them taking it all the way with ease.
I wouldn't even call that a slip-up because Clemson is nationally ranked. They're 13th right now, and they are not looking like they're slowing down. But let's shift to the women of Clemson. They take on Virginia Tech in the final ACC matchup of both of their seasons. Clemson is a stout defensive team, Robbie, but they also don't score a lot. They average about 66 points per game, and they concede about 63. But Virginia Tech, on the other hand, scores a lot. They also concede a lot, as we saw the loss against Boston College was a 92-point concession to the Eagles.
Yeah, no, that was an overtime crusher for Virginia Tech. Of course, a game you just can't lose if you want to stay on this bubble. But let's take a look at the highlights from that Boston College game. Eagles lead early, but some nice ball movement around the horn provides a good look from the top of the key, and Karis Baker with a triple. 18-16 Boston College leads. Tiana Todd with a tough drive and finish caps off a stellar first quarter for Boston College, 32-25 at the break. Wenzel stops, pops, and drains the J to put the Hokies on top, 37-36 in quarter number 2. The lead would not last long, however, as the Eagles would go up into the half 43-39 thanks to the Sidbury triple from the left wing. The Hokies surged back in the third quarter as Cale Peterson dropped in a floater from the left block, 66-63 Tech. A few minutes into the fourth quarter now, Hokies down 4, and look at this reverse lay, Mackenzie Nelson. Matilda Ecknow, some ball movement to get an open look from 3, and she connects, 75-74 Virginia Tech. Sidbury beats the shot clock in overtime, short jumper, and it's a tie game here in Boston. Less than a minute to go in the contest. Kayla Ivey steps back, And the dagger, 92-89, Boston College wins an absolute thriller up on the East Coast. So it was a heartbreaker for Virginia Tech, Landon, but they just got to look ahead because they still have a game to be played, like you mentioned, against that Clemson team, and they're still kind of on this bubble here.
They really do, and I think the main thing that crushed the Hokies last night was the Rose Mishaw ejection. A little scuffle between players, and apparently she said something, and it's not hard to not hear what she said when Conte Forum only had about 100, 200 people in there, and that's not an underestimate, folks. But yeah, so it's a bad loss, not a loss that you want. It puts them in a last team out position in bracketology, but that's Virginia Tech. Let's take a look at Clemson. They had a pretty bad loss against Louisville last night, and let's take a look at how that happened. The game started off well with a beautiful backdoor cut by Loyal McQueen, 2-0 Tigers. Later on in the first, Jada Carey nails the pull-up three from the top of the key, quickly answered by a left-wing triple by Maddie Kluse. Clemson back on top. Neom! There goes McQueen with the layup, 26-22 Clemson. Louisville would have the last laugh of the first half as Isella Arenas spun and fired to put the Cardinals up 31-30. This is the point where it went downhill for Clemson. Tajiana Roberts with the bucket, plus the foul. Double-digit lead now for Louisville. A nice feed from Raven Thompson led to a Tessa Miller layup. 8-point lead now for the Cardinals as Clemson looks to cut back into the lead. Louisville started the final quarter with an 11-0 run and did not look back. Tajiana Roberts buries a triple and buries the Tigers as they jump to a 20-point lead and cruise on to a 78-52 victory in the KFC Yum Center. Not the result you'd want if you're Clemson, Robbie, and a good sign for Virginia Tech going into the final match of the ACC season as the Hokies defeated the Cardinals on Liz Kitley night not too long ago here in Castle Coliseum.
Yeah, definitely not the result you want if you're Clemson, if you're Virginia Tech, yes, because now going into this last game, it's definitely a must-win if you want to stay in this tournament. It seems every time Virginia Tech picks up a big win, a huge loss comes right after that, crushing loss per se. So Virginia Tech against Clemson now a must-win. A Clemson team, like you said, got blown out by a team that Virginia Tech defeated.
Yeah, they're going to need some consistency soon, and some consistency as the action in Greensboro is slated to kick off on Wednesday. 5 straight days of ACC women's basketball where eventually a team will claim royalty to the All-Coast Conference throne. What teams have the best chance of a crown atop their heads on Sunday? Our very own Pearce Mcknight has the answer. Pearce?
The ACC women's basketball tournament is in sight as each team has one regular season game left. With that being said, I'm here to give you my top 5 teams to look out for. First off, we have the 9th-ranked Wolfpack starting us off. This team isn't flashy, but they know how to string some wins together. All of their losses came against top 25 teams besides TCU, who is now ranked 10th in the AP poll. They have lost some big games, but they have notable wins too, such as Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame, which was ranked 1st in the country at the time. This team can light up the scoreboard, and I'm confident that they will do the same in the ACC tournament. Now, I may sound like a broken record, but let's not shy away from Virginia Tech causing some chaos next week. This team is full of efficient scorers. The Hokies shoot 46.8% from the floor, along with 37.9% from 3. When they are hot, they are scary. They aren't the best defensive team, but they are always competing in games. 12 of 21 games against Power 4 teams that they've won or lost by a margin of 10 points or less. If the standings stay the same, Virginia Tech will face Georgia Tech, who they already beaten 105-94 in an overtime thriller early in the season. This next team has been disappointing in other sports, but not women's basketball, the Florida State Seminoles. 7 100-point games. Yes, 7. And you're probably thinking, oh, they just dominated their non-conference schedule. Now, they did, but 3 of their 100-point games were against ACC squads. 100 points is easy when you have the league leader in points per game, Tanaya Latson. The Noles don't just score. They are active on defense as well. The Florida State Seminoles averaged 5.7 blocks per game, with Michaela Timpson averaging 3.1 herself. They pick pockets too, averaging 9.6 steals per game. This team is complete and ready to take on whoever's in their way, and that's exactly what they did last night, defeating Notre Dame 86-81 in South Bend. This next team is the Duke Blue Devils. Duke is one of the best teams in terms of defense efficiency. The Blue Devils just allow just under 59 points per game. The Blue Blood defends the 3 unlike any other, only giving up 4 threes a game. Their offense isn't as good as their defense, but they don't say defense wins championships for nothing. And last, but certainly not least, my favorite to win the ACC tournament, Notre Dame. The Irish have been on one of the best teams in the nation. After 2 straight losses against TCU and Utah, they went on a tear, winning 19 straight games. Hannah Hidalgo is the second in the nation for points per game, averaging 24.3 points. Hidalgo is not just limited to scoring, as she averages just under 4 steals a game. To say the least, this Notre Dame squad runs through Hannah Hidalgo. This year's ACC tournament will provide close games, passion, heartbreak, and everything in between. So tune in March 5th for the first round on the ACC network.
Great stuff, Pearce. And Robbie, let's take a look at the ACC women's tournament bracket. If the season were to end today, what do you have for me?
Yeah, let's take a look, Landon. And one thing that sticks out to me is Virginia Tech right off the bat. Of course, if the season ended today and the standings stayed the same, Virginia Tech would have a date with Georgia Tech, a very talented team. Of course, they beat them early on in the season, but this Georgia Tech team was undefeated at one point, and they were ranked at one point. The Hokies, of course, stopped that momentum, but still very tough sledding for Virginia Tech early, and it only gets tougher after that if the Hokies can find a way to win that game, as they play the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the second round if they can beat the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
It really is a well-rounded bracket if you really look at it. A lot of ranked teams that are in both the first and second rounds. A date with Notre Dame is a date that no one is looking forward to, especially Virginia Tech, who suffered a 20-point loss to them earlier in the season. Notre Dame has been on the downfall lately as they lost to Florida State and NC State back-to-back games, but those teams are also good and in the running for an ACC tournament championship, which I think a lot of teams could pick up, really, if you really think about it.
Yeah, this ACC women's bracket, at least, is absolutely loaded, and I'm getting pumped up just thinking about these ACC tournaments kicking off. And as much as I could sit here with you, Landon, and talk hoops for hours, there's a whole lot more going on in Blacksburg. For a quick 2-minute drill on everything Hokie sports away from the hardwood, here's our very own Robert Bateman.
Could the Hokies hunt the Wolfpack and secure a share of the ACC title? I heard a rumor Bob the Builder lost his hammer, but no worries. VT baseball has plenty to go around. And will anyone figure out how to hit against Virginia Tech softball? My guess, probably not. All that and more coming your way, so as always, welcome back to another edition of the 2-minute drill. Start the clock. We begin on the mats with the biggest ACC wrestling duel of the year between number 10 ranked Virginia Tech and the number 7 ranked NC State Wolfpack. There was a lot at stake between these two bitter rivals. With a win, VT would earn a share of the ACC trophy, and with a loss, NC State would hold sole ownership of the ACC regular season title. It all started with Alabama Sam Latona setting the tone with a dominant 7-0 decision over Troy Homan. And how about we investigate one of the matches that really helped cement the Hokies' lead as Mac Church makes Derek Fields say his prayers with a clutch win in the sudden death rounds to put the Hokies up 12-0 on the team score. Finally, the match that sealed the deal was arguably the most touted of the night between two top 5 125ers in Eddie Ventresca and Vince Robinson. It was neck and neck the entire match, but that late takedown from Ventresca sealed it for VT, and Virginia Tech takes home a share of the ACC regular season title. Let's take a 3-minute drive down the road to Atlantic Union Bank Park, where Virginia Tech baseball played host to the UNCG Spartans in a 3-game series. If there's one thing we know about Coach Chef's squad, they love to smash the leather off the ball. Sam Tackett steps up, and I think you can guess where this one is going. 391-foot bomb to left field to put the Hokies up 1-0. Look at the dugout go crazy as he celebrates rounding the bases, and watch out, Turf, the hammer's coming. The Hokies would drop the first game, but rounded out the weekend pretty well at 2-1. We stick with the diamond and wrap things up with a bit of Hokies softball. So I've always been insecure about the fact that when I swing a baseball bat, I have the same coordination as a baby giraffe. But nothing boosts my confidence more than watching Emily do the same thing against D1 competition. The Hokies ace has already thrown 2 perfect games this year, and she didn't stop there, as she threw a no-hitter this past Wednesday against Liberty and a 9-0 win for the Hokies. Just a little advice to VT softball opponents for the rest of the season: make sure you bring one of these in case Emily steps on the mound. Well, that's all I've got for this week's edition of the 2-minute drill, so I'll send you back over to Landon and Robbie.
Great stuff as per usual, Robin. Blacksburg is certainly buzzing right now about all things Hokie sports, but Landon, it's time for one last segment here on the 3304 Sports Tip-Off Show. It's pretty simple. It's called Over or Under. Okay. And I'll start. First things first, over or under 4.5 teams will make the men's NCAA tournament from the ACC.
I'm going to go under. Like, you got Duke is a lock. Then you got SMU, Louisville, and Clemson. I think that's the only 4 that really have a case right now. Wake Forest is on the bubble. Not entirely sure about them, but I'm thinking bubble teams from the ACC just aren't going to get the bid.
Yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm going to disagree. I'm going to go over 4.5. I think, like you mentioned Duke, Louisville, Clemson. I think Wake Forest is that last team in, and hey, you said SMU. I'm confident in them getting that bid as well. I think 5 teams will go dancing, and maybe Wake Forest is a strong showing, and so does another team that's underperforming like UNC, and maybe we even get 6 teams in the ACC tournament. I could see some madness happening here towards the end. But next question, Virginia Tech seed in the NCAA women's tournament, over or under 10.5?
I'm going to go over. Just because they were slated as a last team out, I don't think they're going to be able to get under that 10.5 mark unless they were to win the the ACC tournament. They can maybe slip under into a 10 or 9 seed, but right now I've got them maybe 11 seed or a 12 seed.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on this one. I'm going to say over. I think they're going to fall into that last team in bubble with the 11 and playing on the first day. So I think over 10.5 is the right move. And last question here. Over or under 2.5 teams from the ACC making an appearance in this year's Final Fours across both brackets?
You know, they say ACC teams always perform better in March and April. I'm going to go over. Duke, I think, will for sure make the Final Four. I think they're going to be the only men's team for the ACC making the Final Four. But then you look on the other side, you've got Notre Dame, Florida State, NC State, Louisville. You've got all these great teams in the ACC, Duke and North Carolina as well. They can all make a run to the Final Four. I think it could be similar to how the NCAA soccer tournament worked out for the women's, in which the entire Final Four was ACC teams, and 6 of 8 teams in the quarterfinals were ACC teams. I think we're going to see something similar to that in NCAA tournament time in March.
Well, I appreciate the optimism, Landon, but I'm going to also have to disagree. I'm going to say under here, and I can see under 1.5. I think that the ACC might have to face a grim reality when it comes to the NCAA and the national landscape. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of good teams in the ACC, but we've seen in years past when FAU and SDSU were in the Final Four, the best teams don't even make it sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and say under here, but like always, we're going to have to wait and see how March shakes out, Landon.
Indeed we will. And that's going to do it for our show today. Thank you to our reporters Robert Bateman, Pearce Mcknight, and Connor Arthur. For Robbie Ackerly, I'm Landon Weaver, and we will see you guys in the beautiful Moss Art Center next week.